Sarah Caldwell never expected her life to change with the arrival of a single letter. Yet that Tuesday morning felt like the beginning of a storm she couldn't see coming. She was already running late. Mason, her 7-year-old, had managed to spill juice down his only clean shirt. The car was making that strange, grinding noise again, and the power company's final notice sat unopened like a warning of doom. So when she saw the certified envelope, she almost tossed it aside, assuming it was another problem she didn't have the strength to face. But the return address caught her attention: Harrington Associates, estate attorneys. Inside, the letter announced the unthinkable. Her Aunt Vivian, a woman she barely knew, had left her an inheritance. It wasn't cash or jewelry or anything practical. It was a crumbling property in the Appalachian foothills. The Brackenridge House, built in 1892, rotting deep in 60 acres of wild forest. Her cousin Janet mocked the news, sneering that the house was worthless, a cruel joke from a cruel woman. But Sarah couldn't ignore the stubborn flicker inside her, the same grit that had carried her through years of poverty, single motherhood, and silence from the family who judged her. That weekend, she drove Mason to see the house. The gates were rusted, the forest pressed close like it was holding secrets, and the house loomed like a forgotten giant with dark, empty eyes. It was broken, worthless, terrifying, and yet it was hers. For Sarah, even a cruel joke could be transformed into something new. Sarah returned to the house alone, determined to look beyond the surface. Equipped with gloves, a crowbar, and a flashlight, she pushed inside the rotting structure. The foyer revealed a chandelier hanging crooked, its crystals gray with dust, while the hardwood floors moaned under every step. Still, she noticed something unexpected. The foundation was solid. Room by room she explored. The kitchen frozen in the 1950s, bedrooms still holding photographs and clothes as if their owners had vanished overnight. Then in a small yellow-painted child's room, she discovered a leather journal. Its pages, written in careful handwriting, mentioned a special room her father kept locked, a secret the girl would understand one day. Sarah's pulse quickened. She remembered the basement door, camouflaged under layers of paint. She had noticed it but never tried to open it. Now the journal gave her reason. Armed with her crowbar, she scraped the paint, pried the frame, and after an hour of splintering wood and sweat, the sealed door gave way. Darkness and a staircase appeared, leading down into a place the family had hidden for decades. The air smelled of minerals and secrets, pressing against her chest as she stepped into a basement that felt less like a cellar and more like a vault. At the far end stood a steel door, far too modern for the old house, locked with a combination dial. Scratched into the surface were numbers: 11/29/53, a date. She turned back to the journal and found that November 29, 1953 was noted as Mama's birthday. With shaking hands, Sarah spun the lock. Click, click, click. The heavy door swung open, and Sarah's flashlight caught a sight that made her knees tremble. The walls were lined with shelves, each stacked with velvet pouches, glass jars, and wooden boxes. Inside were uncut diamonds, each stone glittering like captured stars. She pulled open a pouch and nearly dropped it when the raw gems spilled through her fingers. Every container held more diamonds mixed with emeralds, sorted, labeled, and stored with care. In the center stood a desk with a leather ledger and a sealed envelope with her name written across it. Not the family's name, not to whom it may concern, but her own. Sarah's hands shook as she opened the letter, instantly recognizing Vivian's handwriting. The words inside weren't cruel, they were deliberate. Vivian confessed she had watched Sarah from a distance for years, admiring her resilience, her strength, her refusal to surrender even when mocked by the family. These diamonds, worth nearly $15 million, were the family's hidden fortune, hoarded through generations and disguised under the myth of a worthless house. Vivian left them not as a taunt, but as a test. She warned Sarah, wealth could corrupt just as it had poisoned their bloodline. The diamonds were hers to use, but only if she remembered not to become like them. Sarah dropped to her knees, the letter crumpling in her hand, tears blurring her vision. For years she had been dismissed as worthless, a mistake, a burden. And yet here was undeniable proof. Her aunt believed she was the only one strong enough to bear the family's greatest secret. Sarah didn't take the fortune all at once. Instead, she carried away 3 small diamonds to a discreet gemologist 2 states away, where she confirmed the stones were real, each worth over $40,000. His only advice had been simple, be careful, stones like these change people. Sarah nodded but kept silent. She knew he was right. Back at the house, she studied its structure with new eyes. The foundation was solid, the forest beautiful, the isolation protective. She began to envision a purpose greater than herself. Selling a handful of diamonds, she paid off debts, secured Mason's education, and began restoring the house. Contractors from faraway towns were hired to prevent gossip, told a simple story about a life insurance payout. But her vision expanded. This house could become a refuge, a retreat for women like her, single mothers drowning under judgment, exhaustion, and poverty. A place where broken lives could be pieced back together. Sarah invested every dollar carefully, transforming decay into possibility. The once laughing stock of her family became the foundation of a new dream. But small towns have sharp eyes, and gossip traveled faster than she had expected. Relatives who had ignored her for years suddenly remembered her number. Janet called first, feigning sweetness, while Uncle Howard tried to cloak greed in family duty. They smelled money like sharks smelled blood. But Sarah wasn't the desperate girl they remembered. She had allies now, Mrs. Chen, who helped with Mason, Marcus, the honest contractor, and Alina, the social worker who guided the program. Together, they weren't just fixing a house. They were building a legacy. The day her relatives arrived felt like a storm breaking. Expensive cars crunched up the dirt road, out of place against the whispering pines. Janet led the way, heels sinking into soft earth, her voice dripping venom disguised as concern. "Don't you think family should have been told?" she demanded, face twisting between a smile and a snarl. Sarah stood on the freshly painted porch, the retreat bustling behind her with women and children preparing for their first orientation weekend. Laughter echoed from the renovated halls as her relatives circled like vultures. Uncle Howard spoke of unity, Janet accused her of theft, but Sarah held Vivian's letter like a shield. Calmly, she reminded them where they had been when she worked 3 jobs, when Mason needed surgery, when she was drowning and they turned their backs. "Family?" she asked softly. "You only remember me when there's money." She explained what the house had become, not a hoard for greedy heirs, but a sanctuary for those who needed it. The relatives grew red-faced, demanding their share. Sarah stood firm. "Vivian left it to me because she knew you'd be corrupted. She trusted me to do what you never would, use it to help others." The relatives threatened lawsuits, but Sarah had prepared. Her new lawyers specialized in shielding charities from predatory families. One by one, the relatives retreated, their engines roaring angrily down the road. Sarah watched them disappear, knowing they would never forgive her. but she no longer needed their approval. Behind her, the laughter of children was proof she'd already won. Months turned to years, and Brackenridge House was reborn. Its once sagging walls gleamed with fresh paint, its halls filled with life, and its forest surrounded it like a protective embrace rather than a curse. Sarah had built Brackenridge Haven, a retreat for single mothers and children, funded carefully with the diamonds she released little by little. But she was smart. She didn't just spend, she invested. Programs for childcare, counseling, job training, and legal aid blossomed within the retreat. Women arrived broken, exhausted, and hopeless, and left with dignity, courage, and a future. Sarah tracked every diamond sold, every life touched, transforming the old ledger from a record of greed into a testament of change. The relatives whispered from afar, jealous and confused, unable to understand how the worthless mistake had turned inherited shame into a movement. Even when Janet appeared with apologies wrapped in expensive gifts, Sarah didn't waver. She welcomed her like any other visitor seeking help, but refused to offer special treatment. Janet, unwilling to scrub floors or live without luxury, left quickly, never to return. Sarah realized then that the house's transformation wasn't just in the bricks and mortar. It was in the people who filled it, in the ripple effect that spread beyond its walls. The forest no longer hid secrets. It now sheltered hope. 5 years later, Sarah stood in the same clearing where she had once feared the house's dark silhouette. Now, children played in gardens, mothers sipped coffee on the porch, and the forest sang with life instead of whispers. Mason, taller now and filled with the same stubborn resilience as his mother, worked beside her in the vegetable patch, pulling carrots from the soil. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you never opened that door?" he asked. Sarah considered the question, remembering the basement vault, the diamonds glittering like forbidden stars, and most of all Vivian's gamble. "We would have been okay," she said softly, "but sometimes the universe gives you a chance to be more than okay." As the sun dipped low, she returned to the basement vault where only a handful of diamonds remained. She had been careful, turning them into education, expansion, and opportunities that would long outlast the stones themselves. Soon, there would be no diamonds left, but that no longer mattered. The retreat was thriving, supported now by donors, volunteers, and former residents who returned to give back. Vivian's test had been passed. Sarah had proven that wealth, when placed in the right hands, could become more than money. It could become legacy. Sarah tucked Mason into bed that night, the forest quiet under silver moonlight. He looked up at her with sleepy eyes and whispered, "I'm glad we're not rich." She smiled, puzzled, until he added, "Because if we were, we might be mean like them, but instead we're useful." Out of the mouths of babes, that was the truth. Sarah realized the diamonds had never been the real treasure. The real inheritance was purpose, resilience, and the ability to transform what was mocked as worthless into something priceless. The Brackenridge house no longer carried the stench of secrets. It breathed with laughter, courage, and hope. Sarah had turned a cruel joke into a sanctuary. She had taken 15 million in stones and transformed them into lives changed, futures rebuilt, and a movement that couldn't be measured in dollars. And as she walked the halls of the retreat, she knew this story wasn't hers alone. It belonged to every woman who had been dismissed, every child who had been overlooked, every person who had been told they weren't enough. Because sometimes the biggest treasures aren't found in vaults or diamonds. They're found in people who refuse to give up. If you believe in stories of resilience, redemption, and hidden blessings, don't forget to hit subscribe, share this story, and join us for the next journey. Because somewhere out there, another forgotten house, another hidden fortune, and another story of courage is waiting to be told. And you won't want to miss it.